podcast where hindsight is always 2020. And we explore the great books, works, and ideas of the century. Now, here's your host, teacher, and author, Matthew Hines.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Books in Hindsight. I have with us, as I promised, I have Maxine Meilleur. She is a medium and a spiritualist. And this week, we're going to be talking about issues that have to deal with faith. And on Friday, we're going to be talking about, or with another guest, and we're going to be talking about a loss of faith. But today, we're talking with Maxine Meilleur, and she's going to be talking about mediums, spiritualism, and she has written a plethora of books. And so I really can't wait to get started talking to her. So I want to just give you her website before we start so that if you are watching on YouTube or you have access, you can look at her website. It is moderndayseer.com. And again, it's Maxine Meilleur, and the pronunciation is Meilleur. So, Maxine Meilleur, welcome to Books in Hindsight.
Welcome, Matt. Thank you for having me.
Yes, Maxine, and it's really an honor to have you. You're our first Harvard person associated with Harvard. I'm not sure where we're going to go with that, but it's really an honor to have you on here. According to your biography, since 1857, you're the first divinity and spiritual. I want to look at it. You're the first spiritualist and working medium to be considered for acceptance at the Harvard Divinity School. So that's quite an honor. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, spiritualism began in America in 1847 as a movement, and it really caught fire. Within a couple of years, there were table-tipping phenomena in almost every town along the eastern coast. There were mediums. There were frauds. There was just, the door just blew right open in 1848. And in that era, there was a young man who, by all intents and purposes, was a genuine medium. And he came from the Unitarian background. And but when he went to Harvard Divinity School, he openly had seances. And he was kicked out. So I called myself the first working medium since Harvard Divinity School kicked this guy out in the 1850s. And even when I was walking around campus, some of the professors would be looking at me because I had heard that people on the admissions committee, had said certain things. And in hindsight, I knew who they were because I was had a little ESP, but it's like, oh, there she is. Oh, So I approached a lot of my professors about researching and writing about spiritualist phenomena, but surprisingly, I got a very cold shoulder, even though Harvard was home of a guy named William James. And he not only was the father of American psychology, he really investigated mediumship and spiritualist phenomena in the early 20th century. And we could go into more of that, but in the modern era, they don't want anything to do with that.
Right. And Maxine, so that if this was a movie, that would be the great beginning teaser to get people interested in, because we're going to come back to talk about Harvard, about Harvard's mentality, about Harvard's beginnings in divinity. And we're going to talk a little bit about your progression at Harvard. But right now, can you tell us about your personal background? What got you interested in spiritualism and becoming a medium in the first place?
Well, Matt, we do have a lot in common because I'm a fellow veteran, 9 years U.S. Army, and was a paratrooper just like you. And so during my college time, I went to some spiritualist churches. You know, when you're young, some people kind of go church shopping, and I found spiritualist churches in Florida, which were formed, I didn't know it at the time, by snowbirds, people who moved down to Florida during the winter, and during the summer they were at a place called Camp Chesterfield, and I kept hearing them talk about Camp Chesterfield in church. And these spiritualist churches did phenomena, as part of their service, and integrated life after death as part of their, quote, dogma. And I thought, this church is kind of cool. And so I began an affiliation with spiritualism. And then, life caught up with me, and so forth and so on. And many years later, I went back to spiritualism at a place called Lily Dale in upstate New York. And so I've been researching, I've been studying, and doing a real deep dive into this, and not taking any belief on faith. I call myself a skeptical believer. And so I look at phenomena in a very healthy way, and I research, and so I'm a truth seeker.
Okay, Maxine, so I can't let you continue on anymore. I have to hold up a podcast stop sign here. Tell us, what is spiritualism? Because I assume it is a belief in God, but more of an informal belief in God. Could you explain what spiritualism is, what it means to you?
Spiritualism, like I said, started in 1848, modern spiritualism, and with the phenomena of the Fox sisters. They had poltergeist, perhaps, activity. Nobody really knows, but in their house, and they ended up communicating with someone from the other side. And so this started the movement in 1848. Now, as with movements, sometimes they turn into religions. And in both the United Kingdom and America, they had formalized religious organizations based on spiritualism in about 1893. So by the 1890s, there were bona fide churches that called themselves Spiritualist, and it was extremely popular in both the U.S. and the UK, with thousands of churches. And they had two governing organizations like religions have. But then there were independent churches that did kind of their own thing. So I call myself a spiritualist. One of the great spiritualists in the UK said that spiritualism is a religion, a science, and a philosophy. And what he meant by that in the 1920s and 1910s in the UK, so many scientists were investigating and researching spiritualist phenomena that spiritualists embraced this scientific research because they wanted the world to know that their phenomena was legitimate. And philosophy the philosophy side of it also developed through knowing that if life is eternal, past what we call the stage called death, then that puts a philosophical bent on this life. And I could explain that later, but spiritualism is known as a religion, an ism, a science, and a philosophy.
Okay, and that's a great explanation, but my question is, and I want to go back to your Army experience. That's very interesting, and how you did 9 years in the 82nd. That's a miracle in itself, and you must be some kind of spiritualist just to do that. But in religion, there's heaven. In religion, you have a reward. What is the motivation? What draws people to spiritualism?
Well, usually the grief of someone in their family dying and wanting to know what happened to my loved one, what happened to my child, what happened to my loved one, what happened to my mother. And so a lot of people are drawn to spiritualism because we believe that communication with the so-called dead is possible. And so this gives tremendous comfort to those who are grieving. And a lot of people who...
let me just jump in here and remind everybody that's listening or watching on YouTube, Maxine's website is moderndayseer.com, and Maxine's book, since this is Books in Hindsight, and we need to talk a little bit about your books also, but we're talking about great moments of modern mediumship, volumes 1 and 2, and we also have a book called What Great Mediums Have Taught Us About Spirit Guides and What Great Mediums Have Taught Us About Spiritual Healing. Another book called What is Spiritualism? And then you have a coffee book on top of everything else. So very diverse. So yeah, check out Maxine's website or Google her, and you can check out her books right now as we speak. But obviously she's written a lot, very extensively about the topic. So Maxine, all right, let's what were you doing in the Army? I have to jump back to, no pun intended, I have to jump back to that.
Hey, well, I was a parachute rigger.
Wow.
So I packed the parachutes and I supervised such. I was in warehouse and logistics. So there is a science to packing parachutes, and and the motto of every parachute packer is, "I will be sure always."
Yeah, well, Maxine, if I knew there was somebody who was into spiritualism packing my chute, maybe you might not take it as seriously. So you were down at Pope Air Force Base. You're working off Pope?
I was at Fort Bragg for a while. That's correct.
Right, but you're rigging. Did you rig down at Pope? I thought you guys rigged it right there at the base.
No, there were several facilities at Fort Bragg, but of course we would take them to Pope.
Okay, for some reason I just, and maybe it's the longest day where John Wayne throws his coffee cup and says, "We're going, it's on." I for some reason I put that at Pope Air Force Base. I put that room there. All right, well, that's very interesting. So, did you do a lot of jumping? I guess you had to stay qualified.
Absolutely, we had to jump a minimum of once every 3 months, but we're always competing to get extra jumps, and I think I, like you, also did some civilian and some weekend jumping.
Yeah. All right. Well, I just didn't. I didn't like it at all, I have to say, because you guys probably did a lot of Hollywood stuff, but we had to do the combat equipment jumps, and it's night, and I never enjoyed it, except for in jump school. I was lucky for some reason. My first jump was on my 19th birthday, and I don't know why, but they let me stand I got to be the first guy in the door. So I got to look out over Alabama, whatever. But for some reason, my first 3 jumps, I got to be the first guy in the door. So that was kind of cool. And also it might have something to do with I'm LDS, and the jump master was also Mormon. He's a Samoan named Sergeant Sinapi. I don't know if you ever heard of him. But so anyway, but he was also LDS, and so he let me get in the door. Okay, so let's go back to talking about spiritualism, and I guess throwing in what people call Mormonism also stems from the year 1847. And so let's just go back now in history, excuse me, for just a second or two, and let's talk about the Great Revival of the 1820s and 30s. And so there was a Great Revival, and a lot of like Joseph, I guess it was a little bit earlier, but like Joseph Smith went and had his revelations, and everybody was out searching for God and the right way, and America was just basically overtaken by people looking for basically a new avenue to God. So can you talk a little bit about how that affected spiritualism or vice versa?
You're absolutely right. Before the Civil War, there was this period of awakening in America. Traditional religions just weren't cutting it for people who were living out in the rural areas, and they sought their own truth, whether it was the Seventh-day Adventist, Mormonism. It happened all over in an area of Western New York called the Burnt Over District. And whether it be the Shakers or the Quakers, they're or newer movements like the Mormon prophet finding these tablets and talking to angels. That couldn't have happened in cosmopolitan Boston or New York or Philadelphia, but out on the hinterlands of America, people were away from traditional religion and seeking still answers to fundamental questions. And also, in the case of Joseph Smith and the Buck sisters, seeing phenomena and having no priest or rabbi to interpret it, so they interpreted it on their own, and new movements spawned. So it, like I said, it spawned new religions and movements, and to a certain degree, it's still happening because people are fundamentally curious, and a very high percentage of people today are non-affiliated. They might have been born into a mainstream religion, but they're questioning and they're allowing themselves to seek their own interpretation. And so the percentage of millennials or are called nuns. They're none of the above. They still believe in something, but they're none of the above. None of the so this awakening that occurred in the U.S. before the Civil War, it can be argued, is still going on.
Right. And another thing that, like, I wrote a book about, it's called Deceptions of the Ages, and it's about that same thing that you're talking about. And it just basically stemmed from a real disillusionment with organized religion. And so I just want, because you hear people say, well, I'm spiritual. I'm spiritual. I'm not religious. I'm spiritual. But we can easily confuse that, like I easily could, with somebody who says, well, I'm a spiritualist, right? So
Right.
I just want people to understand, if you don't already, that we're basically talking about two different things. Spiritual means, like, I'm a spiritual person. I'd rather be outside in the mountains in Montana than I'd rather than being in church, because that's where God is, that God is out in the quiets and the mountains. And so that's my spiritualism. But let's talk about your other term that we're going to be talking about with you, and that is medium. I'm pretty sure people understand what a medium is, but if they don't, could you just tell us what a medium is? And Maxine, are you a medium also?
Sure. The phenomena of mediumship is, as I define it, contact with the spirit world, contact with the discarnate world that is intelligent communication, not random communication, but it has an intelligence behind it. It has a purpose behind it. Now, I hope we can discuss the differences here, because there's a lot of phenomena that is not intelligent communication. So, but a medium is able to facilitate this communication, this intelligent communication. And mediumship as a phenomena can be physical, in which the phenomena is experienced by everyone who witnesses it in a very objective way, whether it be sounds or materializations or sights. Everybody sees the same thing. Or it could be mental mediumship, which is in the mind of the medium. Or it could also be healing mediumship. So physical, mental, healing. You hear a lot today also about trance mediumship, which is actually in the realm of mental mediumship. So mediumship is what I've just explained. A medium is a person who facilitates this communication or this healing. I believe that everyone has some mediumship potential, because it comes from our soul, and we're all souls. Yes, I am a medium, and I should also say that a medium is different from a psychic. A psychic is able to perceive the energy patterns of someone, the past, present, and future. So all mediums are psychic, but not all psychics are mediums. In that some psychics can look at you, Matt, and say, this about you, but they can't talk to the spirit world. They can only derive energy around you. So all mediums are psychic, but not all psychics are mediums.
Wow, you know how long that's going to take me to even, as they say, wrap my head around? All right, so you are talking about, and I really appreciate you saying that, because if you looked at some of my guests I've had on here, Maxine, I've had remote viewers, and I've had people that, like I had a girl, Diet, and I'm not sure what she is. She says she's a remote viewer, but she's more of a psychic. So you have the ability, though, to not only, I guess, see past, present, and future. Is that correct? Can I say that?
That's correct. Psychics, within the energy field of ourselves.
But you also have the ability to speak with other entities?
Yes. It is not. It is it is up to them also. So it's not so much a science, it's an art, because when you involve another person, another entity, the complexity increases fourfold, tenfold.
Right. Now, Maxine, I'm trying to build a framework here, because you offer services and you offer counseling. And I want just people to understand, we're going to narrow down what exactly you do. So when you're talking about you can communicate with other entities, you're not talking about channeling. We are talking about and tell me if I'm wrong, but strictly communicating with people who have lived and passed on. Is that correct?
Correct.
So no channeling.
For all intensive purposes, you can substitute the word channeling with trance. So a trance state is an overshadowing in which someone overshadows your soul and speaks through you. And trance or channeling is a spectrum of phenomena. So you could have a very deep trance, you could have a very light trance, and you could have physiological changes going on. I wrote my master's thesis on channeling in Tibetan Buddhism. So this is a worldwide phenomena incorporated in different cultures. So excuse me for getting off on the tangent, but I think you wanted to know what I do. So that's most people don't.
You're fine. Go. We'll get to that. No problem.
Most people who seek a psychic or a medium aren't interested in talking to grandma, or unless they've just lost someone and they're very deep in bereavement, they don't want the mediumship side. They want to know what my next job's going to be. Is my relationship the one? They want to know psychic stuff in their life. And this type of information can be gleaned by the energy in our aura or around us. And what a psychic will do is to glean that energy. And someone's past, present, and future is in their energy. Someone's deepest fears, are in that energy. Someone's hopes and dreams are in that energy. And if you're not really skilled, you will confuse the past with the future. You will confuse a dream with a fear, or a fear with a dream. And just because it's in your aura and someone can glean it doesn't mean they're very skilled or ethical, And so the phenomena of precognition, researchers call it precognition, but it's also known as divination, or seeing the future, can get kind of woo-woo. But actually, it's a very valid phenomena that has been tested by science, and I could give you the studies. So, seeing into the future, people want to know, is this job the right one? What will happen if I marry this person? And so it's all in that energy. And I call myself the modern day seer, because I don't mean to blow my own horn, but what distinguishes me is I can refine my vision into the future and see what I call timelines and patterns of energy. If you do this, this will happen. If you do that, that'll happen. And so this goes to free will. And is it set in stone? Is our life set in stone? If you say something will happen, will it really happen? No, we have free will. We can choose not to wake up in the morning. We can choose not to marry Mr. and Mrs. X. So that's what I've found that most people want to know is their future. And if it can be done in a very ethical way, it's a good skill. And this has been traced back to ancient Greece, when the generals would go in and consult about the battle and, or the kings. So the oracles of the past, this is what they did.
Yep. Well, okay. So now you've touched on something, and I promise, Maxine, we'll get into what you do and the services you offer, but you keep opening up these cans of worms. So I've had these guys, remote viewers. What do you think about remote viewing? Because you're really talking about the same thing.
Absolutely. I have a lot of respect for Ed Dames and a guy called David Morehouse. Some of them, not so much more, but in my tradition, we call that traveling clairvoyance. And remote viewers are absolutely right in that it needs to be a disciplined, focused protocol. And I've heard Ed Dames say that natural-born psychics are just too chaotic and all over the place to provide good information about the future. And he can be right about that. Most psychics I know are not very disciplined once they get into that mindset. But so remote viewing, traveling clairvoyance, whatever you call it, it's a psychic skill.
Okay, but Maxine, when you're talking about the future, and this is my argument with Ed and with all these other people that talk about remote viewing, is that according to physics, there's Heisenberg's principle that says once you observe something, you changed it. So when you're popping into the future and you're checking things out, you're almost guaranteeing that eventuality is not going to happen. And I saw Joe McMoneagle on YouTube did an interesting thing about they were going to give him a target and he remote viewed the target before they gave it to him. And so he, out-futured them, and it was the correct target. So pretty unusual stuff. But let's, anyway, that's just, what do you think about that? I mean, why is it not 100%?
Well, it's not 100%. Hold on just a second. I would disagree, first of all, that if you see something, you change it. Because the studies that have been done at the Rhine Research Institute in Duke on precognition, like forecasting a random number generator or Zener cards and predicting the next card, if you predict the next card and it occurs, you didn't change it. You just foresaw it. Hence the word precognition. So I know the quantum theory, quantum mechanics of observing phenomena, and the act of observing does change it or influence it. But I would say influence, but not change it. So to say that it changes the future by seeing it, I would revert you back to the studies that contradict that. Okay. What was the other question?
Well, it's just that.
Oh, I know. Why is it not 100%? Because we have free will. Okay. Now, you're in a job, or let's say a person is in a job, and and they've been offered a promotion, and they can see some trouble with this, and they don't know whether to take it or not. Okay. A skilled psychic with precognition abilities, like I said, in my tradition, is trained to go into that energy thread. And it is a thread or a vein of energy that's difficult to get into, but like I'm in Montana or you're in Washington, the analogy of a mining vein is very applicable here. And once you're in that mining vein, you can follow it into the future, into time, okay? But I've also been taught that there are subsequent parallel possibilities. So there are multiple timelines here. Should I take the job? Should I not take the job? Well, if I take the job, follow the energy, and these things most likely will happen. If I don't take the job, follow that energy, that probably will happen. So it's not 100%. It's series of probabilities, okay? And if you can't wrap your head around that, or if you can't accept that, look at the electron in a hydrogen atom. Scientists are saying now that electron is both a wave and a particle. And this electron is spinning around the nucleus of the hydrogen proton nucleus, and it's a cloud, and it's probability that it's here, and it's probability that it's there. It isn't 100% until you identify it, and okay, it's there at that instant, and that instant's gone, it's back in the cloud of probability. So in my small brain, that's how I explain that it cannot be 100%.
Well, I don't have a Harvard brain, so mine's even smaller. And I just say you have, basically like you're talking about your proton or your nuclear, what are we talking about, your electron, that it's all possibilities at once. It's all possibilities at once.
Right.
But what I'm saying is that when you psychic view something, or not so much remote view, but sometimes remote viewing as well, that you guarantee you're never going to be on that track. But then again, you can argue the other way, because if you look at the Star Trek phenomenon and people thought what the future would be, and then we have like the things that we have that were based upon Star Trek, what they saw in Star Trek. So
I have heard also that there are milestones or key points in someone's life going into the future, and it's not a question of if it'll happen, but only when and how.
Okay.
So for instance, if someone's timeline has a breakup or a change of relationship, okay, that could be a death, that could be a breakup, that could be a whole host of things that might be interpreted as a breakup. So that's the how. And the when, it could happen next year, it could happen 10 years from now. But someone's timeline might have this breakup, and it's set as a pattern in their life. But the only question is when or how it'll manifest. Now, this goes back to a theory that before we come into our life, we plan our life. We plan having certain parents, we plan having certain bodies, we plan having certain things in our life. And it's only a question of when and how these major things occur. But if we've planned them before birth, very high probability it'll happen.
Okay. All right. So let's go, Maxine. Let's talk about the services that you offer, because people come to you looking for certain things. What kind of people come looking and seeking the help that you have to give?
Well, here I am sitting at a
Can I throw my psychic ability in here? I want to tell you where you are.
Go ahead.
You're in Butte.
I am.
Look at that. I don't know, because I'm looking at that picture behind you, and for some reason that makes me think of Butte. So, okay. Well, I mean, in Montana, you've got Butte, Bozeman, and I don't
Billings and Helena and
Yeah,
1,000 different things. I like the feel of the West. I've lived out West before, and Butte is a city with character. It's a shadow of its former self, but people out West just get on with it, and not complain. But anyway, like I said, Matt, most people they only go to a psychic when they have a problem, and they want guidance. Okay. And people who go to a medium are more apt to be in a grief state, and they want consoling, and they want positive reinforcement that their loved one is okay, and that's they're not going to hell or whatever their religion may have said, so you have to be very ethical and empathetic to people's problems. And we've all had hardships in our life, and we've all woken up in the middle of the morning saying, gee, I could use some advice, I could use some big picture stuff to help me through this issue.
So so there's people that hire these remote viewers because they want to have an insight into a technology, what another company's doing, some way to get ahead. Do people come to you for the same reasons? They're trying to seek an advantage, or can you offer that?
I've had people saying there's a problem in my organization. Someone is stealing, but I don't know who, or someone's addiction problems is hurting the company. So I've had, believe it or not, Harvard Business School people, very, middle of the night, don't tell anybody I'm coming to you, but, who in my company is stealing from me, and, or is this a good hire? I've got 4 candidates for this job, and they're just too close to it and too analytical. And I said, well, do you know, you should do a background check on one of them, Did you know that? So I've had all different types of people, up front or very behind the scenes. And remote viewers gone into financial, have gone into corporate, help me with my company, what's the next thing. And so I respect that ability.
Maxine, are you able to help these people, and do you give them the advice about the employee and the things that they're looking for?
These are things that I have done in the past.
Okay.
I haven't gotten so much about, the next stock. I'm not a money person. So I don't gravitate toward riches and gains and that kind of stuff. But, who's trustworthy? What's their background? What's the right hire? Who's stealing from me kind of thing. And also, the more personal stuff.
Okay. So what is your ideal client? Who's the person that you can help the most?
Well, I tell everyone I like to do the talking. Okay. And so my ideal client doesn't come in and with a lot of information. Let me tell you. Okay. And only say yes or no, or I don't know to what I say. Because and it's all done from an altered state of consciousness, and the remote viewers don't use the word altered state of consciousness. They use theta state or delta state or whatever, but that's an altered state. And in this state of consciousness that psychics and mediums do their stuff, they can't be given, hello, how are you? What's 2 + 2? Because that'll pull them out of that state. So an ideal client allows me to be in that state and just talk. Does this make sense? Yes. Okay, give me a simple question. Okay, An ideal client will allow the psychic or the medium to stay in that state.
All right. Well, so that is I don't have a lot of experience with this, but that is the first time that I've ever heard anybody that's even associated with this say, I want to just give you the information. And my joke is, well, because they start asking you these questions and you want to say, well, you're the psychic, you should know, right? So that kind of just legitimized you. I mean, I really have so much respect for you already, but just that, I've never heard that from anybody in the field. So you have people that come to you and they want to, is it something that they don't understand about their life? Something happened in their life and you're going to tell them the thing that's wrong and how to fix that?
In a nutshell, yes. And a lot of people say, tell me about my husband or tell me about my child, which can be done as well. So, yeah, I mean, why else would you want to know the unknown? You may want to have some understanding of something that happened in the past. You may want something currently, an understanding or guidance, or you may be looking at a certain future and wondering, is that the right thing? What will happen? So it's all their past, present, and future is what mostly people seek out psychics for. Okay.
And that's why they seek you out.
Yes.
Okay.
And like I said, you also have to empower and be ethical and empower them. Okay, especially when talking about sensitive areas or their future, to empower them, to give them choices and have them understand, to make their own decisions, but based on what you see. So you never tell, I would never say, do this. That's disempowering someone. And people, Matt, there are a lot of disempowered people attracted to this area. And why do people go to therapists? They want people to tell them what to do. No, that's not the game here. This is what is going on, and you should find your own way based on what I said.
Yeah, and then I think that there's another, if you tell people that, well, you should stop drinking and driving, or, you're getting these DWIs, or, stop yelling at your wife or getting angry. But if they could do that, then they wouldn't have the problem in the first place. So I'm afraid that, just like, you'd find it with religion or anything else, they tell you, well, stop doing this and do this way and do it like this. But people just don't want to do it, or they wouldn't have the problem in the first place. So that's really smart that you don't tell people what to do. You're incredibly intelligent. I'm not worthy, as I like to say.
Well, each one of us is an eternal soul. Each one of us has been in existence. You're just having a very temporary experience in someone called Matt. your soul is so timeless and so awesome. And you have journeyed through the arc of your existence to the point that you are now. And the things that we have done, you have done in your past, is just incredible. And it's not confined to this current existence. So people need a little pep talking and to helping them understand what it really means to be an eternal soul.
Yeah. And it's really hard to stay focused on that, in the life that we live, because especially in our, with our culture now and how technology, they use it basically to just disrupt our psyche and our well-being. And it doesn't seem to be used for anything more than that anymore. So, all right, let's talk a little bit about your books again, Maxine, because when I have authors on here that like I have doctors and people that offer services, I say, is that book, can I read that book and then I don't have to go to you? Or are those books an avenue in helping me to understand you? Which is it with your books?
No, neither. I've written about the phenomena of mediumship and all of its manifestations. And what happened was, I'm a prolific reader, and I devour a book, and I write in the margins, and I underline, and I highlight, and I would come across so much material that, nobody else has said this or has done this. This information is useful somehow. So most of my books have been an anthology, a collection of all these bits that I've gleaned from other books and duly cited and referenced so that you could go back to the main source where I found it. I'm not making this up. I found it somewhere. You can go back and check it. So if you want to know about the phenomena of mediumship, I've collected all these stories in these 2 volumes, The Great Moments of Modern Mediumship. And then I've studied the great mediums of the past. And I think that's very important because you hear today so much baseless garbage, Oh, my spirit guide helped me find a parking place. Well, that's completely rubbish, What did the great mediums do with their spirit guides, and what was their relationship to them? And the whole phenomena of spiritual healing. There are so many modalities now. You've heard of Reiki, you've heard of therapeutic touch, maybe, and even then, there's so much misunderstanding and garbage about quote cleansing. Well, what did the great mediums of the past do? And this is not to say they're 100% infallible, but it gives you a reference of, this is a common thread of truth that has been documented for tens, hundreds of years. And, compare that to just, cleansing or pulling or sucking bad energy off of people. Well, that's never been seen before in, quote, the literature. So it helps people believe, and it helps people discern phenomena. Is that really a valid phenomena of sucking bad energy away from people? Well, I'll let the reader decide. If this is a phenomena that has just occurred, well, maybe it's false. Why hasn't it occurred before? So my books are a product of my research and my reading, and I've made it very readable to understand this phenomena. And I've let the reader decide what their truth is. So I don't tell them what the truth is. I just document what has been done in the past.
Okay, so the term, one of your books is Great Mediums. Well, let's just do this. I have to do this. I'm going to give you a couple of mediums, and because I don't know that many, and if you want to throw some in there that I might not have mentioned, you go ahead and do that. But Rasputin, medium?
The Russian guy. Yeah, I think he definitely had some talent. But did he take advantage of his position? Well, you kind of have to cut hairs here. If he was fraudulent or partially fraudulent and wanted to take advantage of his position, did that make him rich? Well, no, not really. Did that end up killing him? Yeah. So I'm on the fence with him. Partially true.
Okay. What about Edgar Cayce?
I think he's the real deal. The volume of material on him is so extensive, and his commitment towards serving others. Yes, he did charge, and yes, he did charge a lot for the day that he was in, but it didn't make him rich. He didn't seek out fame, glory, and New York Times bestseller. Low-key guy, the real deal.
Okay. Now, you had mentioned some sisters. There were sisters in Germany about the 1920s. They had long hair, Orkney something. Do you know about them? They were psychics, but they were like, if you look in this UFO phenomenon in Germany that they were communicating, they were like channeling these people. Okay, so you were talking about two sisters, or you were talking about sisters when we started.
The Fox sisters.
Yeah, I haven't heard about them. Can you talk about them? Are they in your books?
They are.
Okay.
Near Rochester, Buffalo, New York, there was alcoholic blacksmith, I think, and his wife. Very, very common, almost poor people. And they had some sisters, they had some daughters at home. The Fox family, Margaret, Catherine, and Leah. And there was a series of raps, knocks, that would be heard. Was it a poltergeist activity? Well, that goes back to what I said at the beginning. They were able to say, okay, is somebody there? Knock, knock, knock. Okay. One knock for a man, two knocks for a woman. Who are you? One knock man. Da, da, da. So they were able, or they would very laboriously dictate the alphabet. A, B, C, knock. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, I, knock. And they were able to find out and communicate intelligently with a peddler who had been murdered in that house. Okay, so was it a haunting? Was it a poltergeist activity? Well, no, it was intelligent communication. And this ability to communicate with the spirits followed these sisters around in their life. And they would go to New York and they would give sittings, and people would say A, B, C, knock. And very laboriously, they would be able to communicate with their loved ones. Okay, so this was just mind-blowing to the traditional churches at the time. And it just rocked everybody's world. And these young girls, they were teenagers when they started. They couldn't handle the pressure. They fell into alcoholism. and there was a tremendous pressure to perform. And the Catholic Church got a hold of him and had one recant and say, "Oh no, I was just cracking my toes," and that squashed the movement for a while. So the Fox sisters have been written about extensively, but their phenomena and their mediumship has been validated, at least at various times, that it wasn't toe cracking, and it was very intelligent communication.
Okay. So, Maxine, we started this interview talking about your experience at Harvard. So let's, I don't know what that green and black thing is next to your camera, but it's taking away from your beauty. So there we go. See, look at that. Is a great picture.
That's my phone. It says Harvard on the back. So, yeah.
Well, there you go. So, all right. Now, Harvard began as, I believe, the first school was the Divinity School back in the 1600s, right?
To train the future generation of ministers for the colonies.
Right. And so I think about the time, now you mentioned the year 1847, which was the year that the Mormons headed out of Nauvoo, Illinois, headed for Salt Lake, got chased off, and Harvard throws out their psychic medium. I wonder if at that time that there was kind of an because this is also, what year did Marx write, or the Communist Manifesto? About the same time. But I think that we had the Great Awakening. I don't know the extent of it in Europe, but I think that there was an anti Great Awakening with intellectuals, and they said it, and we can talk about like the Smithsonian. They hide away artifacts that don't fit in to the narrative that science is trying to push. So it is very interesting that Harvard would have basically kicked out spiritualism and all of that in the name of science, and they did so. You know about the story of Bud Hopkins, right?
Yes.
So you're the same. You're pretty much the same thing. You're coming back to them to what them would be left field, doing what Bud Hopkins did, and saying there is something legitimate about this field. Now, have you been successful? Are you back in the divinity? Are you in the divinity school, or where are we with that?
Well, I was in a Masters of Divinity program, which is ministerially based, and I switched into more of an academic degree and in religion, and I graduated last year. So I am a master's degree holder in religion. So
congratulations on that. That is awesome.
Well, thank you. But other institutions have really picked up this ball and run with it. Whether it be the Rhine Center at Duke, they investigate parapsychology as a broad field. There are several universities in England that give PhDs in parapsychology, and these are very, very laboratory-based programs where you have to really prove your chops and add to the field in a way. So there other organizations around the world are picking this up in a research-based way.
But you had to defend yourself. You had to defend yourself as, does your degree reflect the fact that you do studies in being a medium? No.
Okay. I ended up doing a thesis on trance mediumship. Now, it's kind of funny because when you do a PhD dissertation or a master's thesis, you have to find a faculty member that will take you on. And nobody wanted to take me on within spiritualism. And there were many people at Harvard who are into Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism. So I had to change my approach to find an advisor. I said, okay, I'll look at trance within spiritualism and Tibetan Buddhism. So within academia, they will only want to take on projects within their field.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing too controversial. So it's a self-perpetuating kind of scheme that you never get innovation in academia. It can be argued because of this.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, yeah, that's quite a battle that you must have thought or fought. Have you ever been, I don't know if tested is the right word. Has anybody done studies on you?
Has anybody done studies on me? There are accreditation. You could go out to, I don't know if I should name names because a lot of the modern TV mediums, will give a certification program, and that maybe you would be one of 500 people in a hotel ballroom for an afternoon, and then you get a piece of paper saying you're accredited from this popular medium. So I kind of poo-poo a lot of the accreditation programs you would typically see. However, I do know that some of them are very extensive and very legitimate, but I haven't gone down that road.
Okay. All right. Well, that is so interesting. So I just want to go over, we're almost out of time, Maxine, but Maxine's books are, and again, it's Maxine Meilleur, and its last name is Meilleur, and she has The Great Moments of Modern Mediumship, volumes 1 and 2, what great mediums have taught us about spirit guides, and what great mediums have taught us about spiritual healing. What is spiritualism? And Maxine, what is the deal with the coffee book?
Well, again, Matt, you and I overlap. I spent some time in the Middle East too, and they love their Turkish coffee or Arabian coffee, and their major religion, kind of poo-poos divination, but you kind of find some people who drink coffee and look at the grounds, and so reading coffee grounds from a Turkish coffee cup is kind of a fun way if you love coffee and you want that kind of divination, precognition. It can be enhanced by coffee grounds or reading tea leaves.
Entrails? Are we reading?
No.
In the coffee grounds?
I draw the line in sacrificing pigeons or goats, but
it's the same thing, right? I mean, you're looking for patterns.
Yes.
Amazing. Now, what countries? Can I ask you what countries you were in? Iraq you were in Desert Storm.
I still go back and forth to Kuwait quite a bit.
Okay.
And so I have a special tie to that country, but I've visited Saudi Arabia, Jordan, the Gulf states, Oman, like you. So.
Okay. Well, don't ever tell those people you're doing that because you'll freak them out. And they'll go, oh, that's jinn. That's jinn.
Oh, yeah.
Don't do it. Don't do it. So.
But Matt, some people, they take a picture of their coffee cup with their cell phone and then they show me a couple days later.
All right. I have to ask this. What are you seeing in the coffee grounds? Are you seeing your future or something else?
It's some people get very literal in the pattern and say, oh, I see a dog and a dog means this, but it's just Now, I might go woo-woo on you here, Matt, but it's like a portal, or it's a place to focus on, and then you go into your altered state. So it doesn't. I've gotten to the point where it doesn't really matter what the pattern is, as long as you're in that altered state.
Okay. All right. Well, you're so interesting to talk to. I wish we could do this for about 3 hours, but I promised you an hour and 15 minutes, and we're almost up to that when we finally do the exit and everything. That's going to take up all our time. So, Maxine, do you have any? This has been such a great interview, and it's just been so nice talking to you. Do you have any words of wisdom for people out there, and specifically, if people need to seek you out, how could they do that?
Well, looking back through your podcasts, and I really applaud you for going out on the edge and also looking at a variety of people to help people find a truth or an understanding. My words of advice would be, find the truth that's for you. And for some people, that's in mainstream religion. And for other people, it's continually searching. And it's all good, Find your own truth. Find your own understanding. Don't take what someone else says, to include me. Find your own stuff. That's my words of wisdom. People can contact me through my email, and that's Desert Maxine, one word, DESERTMAXINE, Desert Maxine at hotmail.com. I'll even give my cell phone out, 617-870-8472. And it's not, people are going to say, oh, how much do you charge? Well, a good friend of mine, one of my mentors, and I've copied their pattern, says, pay me what you want. Pay me what you want. Don't expect me to do it now, and don't expect me to, tell you what you want to hear. But, it's not about the money, but whatever exchange you have is graciously accepted.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure a Harvard-educated medium is right up there with Harvard-educated lawyers and the rest of them. So you probably nobody'd want to come to you with, slide you a $5 or something and expect to be taken seriously. Well, all right, Maxine, I'm gonna finish our podcast here. We certainly have left a lot to talk about. I just want to run over in my mind very quickly if we've left anything out there that we needed to talk about. We've talked about your books. We've talked about your website, how to get a hold of you, what you do. Here it is, the last question I want to ask you. Is this dangerous in any way? Is consulting a psychic, is looking into the future, is there any kind of danger that can be involved with looking at your future? Or let's say you look into somebody's died and you want to contact them. What if death is not good? What if it's frightening? Is there danger in the stuff that you do?
Is there...
what if there's taxes after death?
Is there danger in anything? Is there danger in chopping down a tree? If you don't chop it down right, it might fall on your house. So the act itself is not dangerous. There are a lot of unethical people, both so-called psychics and people who seek the psychic help. So the wrong advice to the wrong person at the wrong time is dangerous. But that's not to say the phenomenon is dangerous. So if if a person needs medical help, they should go to a medical doctor, not me. And if I tell them to go to a medical doctor, or I tell them they should go to a medical doctor, then that's my sincere advice, you know. The danger lies in when people are manipulated, taken advantage of, given this quack treatment as opposed to something that will really help them. So it's all with a disclaimer, and it should all be, you know, you wouldn't sell a gun to a crazy person.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I love guns, but let's be common sense here. You know, even Plato said, you know, what is justice? It is justice doing the right thing. If a man is crazy and he wants a knife, you know, do you give him the knife? You know, so the danger goes to ethics and discerning what people need. And unfortunately, there are frauds out there. Unfortunately, there are people who take advantage of people. And unfortunately, this area, Psi, attracts a lot of loonies, you know, people who need help, but not your kind of help, another kind of help. So the danger lies in misuse.
Okay. Well, that's a really good answer. And yeah, because, you know, I don't want to ask you the question, but you probably had to turn people away that were asking you to do things for the wrong reason. And I'm sure obviously you're very ethical. So Maxine, it's been great having you on the podcast. And I appreciate you enlightening our audience. And if you want to get in touch with Maxine, go to moderndayseer.com. And I'm going to put this all on the video on YouTube. And Maxine gave you her number as well. And I do encourage you, if you have a problem, get a hold of her. But also look at her books. I'll have links to her website, her phone number, all that in the description of the podcast, as well as I will have links to her books on Amazon and wherever else they're published. So, Maxine Meilleur, thank you for being on Books in Hindsight.
Well, all the way, Matt.
Yeah. And I have to warn you that when we go to the Tetons, we go down to Yellowstone and the Tetons, we stop in Butte the night before. And then we head into the park after that because we want to get there early in the morning. So this summer, guess who's going to be haunting you? Because we have your number now. So
call me anytime.
All right. Well, great.
Okay.
Great. And if you're ever out in Seattle, you also have an invitation to come and stay with my wife and I as well. You're so interesting.
Thank you.
All right. So, Maxine, it's been very nice having you on the podcast. I don't want to let you go, but I'm going to have to. So everybody out there, check out Maxine's books, What Great Mediums Have Taught Us About Spirit Guides, and another book, What Great Mediums Have Taught Us About Spiritual Healing, What is Spiritualism, and Great Moments of Modern Mediumship, Volumes 1 and 2. All right, everybody out there, for Maxine Meilleur and Matthew Hines, please keep on reading.
This has been Books in Hindsight with your host, Matthew Hines. Please join us for our next podcast and look for our archives on iTunes and go to thehindsight.com. That's HEINES site.com for great books by Matthew Hines and other great authors.